Hi everyone, it's Lori and welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to explore capturing beautiful bokeh in a natural setting out in your garden, but we're also going to take an image of that bokeh and use it in a standalone image where we didn't have that beautiful bokeh. So let's get started and I'll explain what I'm talking about. All right, so to get started, I'm here in Lightroom Classic, and first, I want to show you the scene. So I was shooting this dahlia flower, and I'll show you some other images. It was on a table, and I was using my macro equivalent to an 85 lens, and behind the table, I have some landscape shrubs. And you can see the sunlight was coming through this shrub and it was giving me all of this gorgeous bokeh. Now, I just happened to find this in the garden, but this is a great example when you are shooting something in nature, something that you are doing a still life where you're setting something up in a vase, and you can shoot it outdoors. I was about 4 feet away. 4 to 6 feet is usually a good gauge. And you just want to find where the sun is being filtered through another plant. It could also be filtered through a large tree. So because I had the flower on a table and directly behind it was this bush, as long as I composed my shot and kind of moved around and tilted the camera down, I was able to see all of this gorgeous bokeh. So not only did I take images with the flower, and you'll see I have several of those in different compositions, I also captured the gorgeous light. So you can see shooting this with intentionally out of focus. So I did not focus on the bush. I actually did out of focus so that I could capture all the beautiful bokeh. So now I have these 3 options of files that I can save and use in other images. So what I thought we'd do today is I want to walk you through editing one of these images, and I think we will go with probably this guy. So we'll edit this together, and then we're going to use this bokeh image and this standalone shot and combine the two in Photoshop. All right, so let's first go ahead and make some edits to this image. So of course, I just love this light. I'm going to look at my histogram, and I want to go ahead and bump the whites a little bit to just brighten it some more. And for this image, I am going to brighten the exposure a little bit. I want some more brightness. And I'm also going to think about my crop. So I am going to move this over and maybe put the flower right there in the center. So that's one option. The other option is I could move it over and have it maybe coming out of the rule of thirds or even center, but then I lose my bokeh. So I think what I'm going to do is just come over and kind of center the back of the flower, and that is going to do it. Now I notice a little bit of cleanup, so let's get our remove tool, and I'm just going to come in and pop. I'm going to leave the little ant, I think, for now. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep that or not. I think that's just a preference for you to decide if you like that. And I don't really see any other strong blemishes. And actually, let's go ahead and clean up the ant. I've changed my mind. He doesn't really do much for the story, so I'm going to get rid of him. All right, next, I'm going to come down and work on my colors just a little bit. But to start with that, let's look at the temperature slider. So I have a choice. I could add a little bit more blue tones, or I could add more warmth. And in this example, I want to add a little bit more of that yellow warmth. There's warmth in the light, and there's also yellow in the back of the flower. All right, now for the green and magentas, you've got, again, an option. We can tweak that, can bring back the greens just a little bit, but still keep that yellow brightness. Let's maybe take that magenta over. There we go. Now I'm going to come down to my reds, and here's where you have some options with color. I'm going to keep it a little less saturated. I'm going to saturate the yellow just to make that pop, and I'm going to see what it does to brighten my greens a little bit, darkening the greens. I'm not seeing a big shift there. But let's go to the hue, and I'm going to use the dropper here, and I'm going to bring that down. And yeah, there's yellow and green. So I'm just going to raise that to get that green a little bit darker. And I think that looks pretty nice. So we have a couple other options that we could do with this image. I can select subject, and there's a couple things I could do now with the subject. I'm going to go down to the effects panel, and I could add some texture. I could also reduce the clarity if I want to soften it just a little bit. I like to do these two together. So just a little bit of texture and a little softening, since our background is so beautiful and soft. Now, one last mask that I could do is I can add a linear gradient. I'm actually going to come in from this side. A linear gradient is going to start strong and then slowly fade. Now I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to add a little bit of exposure just to brighten that and open up the shadows a little bit so that we've got a little bit of that consistency as we look at the image. Now I see we've got a little bit of a blemish here, but I can also just go back to our crop. I think I want to get rid of that little bit of bokeh and bring it over. All right, so lastly, I could play with the tone curve. That would be if I wanted to add a little drama to the image, a little mood, or I could pop the highlights a little bit more, maybe bring down the shadows just a little bit. It's really a preference on the story that you want to tell with this image. Okay, so that is that one. Now I'm going to take this bokeh image. I think I've used this one, and this standalone shot that I was focused on the dahlia, but the background was, while it was nice, and I was shooting again with my 60mm macro, which is equivalent to about an 85, I didn't get the same bokeh that I did in the other shots. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Photoshop. So what I did is I clicked on this image and I clicked on the bokeh image. I right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. So I've already set this up for us so that we can come over and take a look at this option. All right, so I'm going to turn these off so you can see. Here's our standalone image, and here is our bokeh image. Now at 100%, you'll see I did a mask. Let me delete that, and we'll walk through this together. So here's where I've added that fun bokeh to this beautiful background. Now the first thing I want to do is lower the opacity of the bokeh background or overlay. Now I'm going to apply a mask. I've got a black brush. I'm going to start with my opacity at 100%. And what I wanted to do is come in and remove that overlay from the center of the flower. So I'm just going to get it at 100%. Then I'm going to drop it to anywhere from 50 to 40%, 45, and I'll come in and blend the edges. And what you want to do is just blend those around so that it doesn't look real harsh. Now, I also want to blend on my jar because I don't want that bokeh right there on top of the jar. So I'm going to blend that as well. So you just come in, and then we can zoom in so that I can make sure that the edges don't have like a halo effect around them. Then you can flip your brush to white, lower the opacity to about 10-15%, and we can just softly go over the edges. Again, this is how we make sure that we don't have a hard edge when you add a texture or an overlay. All right, now I still see a little bit of that bokeh down here at the bottom. I'm going to take my black brush all the way up to 100%. I'm going to make it smaller and come in and just remove that right there on the vase. And maybe just come in. Yeah, that's too much. So we're going to come back and let's take our opacity to 50% with a white brush. And I'm just going to bring back that edge. There we go. Maybe soften that just a little bit. All right, so this is how I used a beautiful background shot that I was able to capture out in a garden where the sun was filtering through this just standard plant. but shooting with it intentionally out of focus, I was able to capture the beautiful light coming through, and now I can use this in multiple images. Now I'm going to add these 3 files to a link to these in the YouTube description if you want to download and use these in your photography. Feel free to grab those. Now to finish up this image, I'm going to go ahead and do a stamped layer, Command Option Shift and the letter E. Again, that's Command Shift Option and the letter E to get a nice stamped layer. This is a combination of these 2 layers so that we can continue to work on this image. Now, the next thing I want to do is go and use my Heal tool, and I'm going to just do a little bit of cleanup on this flower. So we're just going to come in where there's some marks, some cleanup to do. And I do want to clean up these little holes down here. Now you have a choice with your flowers. I do teach an artistic flower photography course where you can decide to leave the imperfections, but sometimes it really helps to tell the story to clean those up. And I think this flower is so beautiful, but it just had gotten a little tattered with some heavy rains and maybe some bugs out in the garden. So I'm just going to continue to clean that up just a little bit. And I think that's really all that it needed. Now, a last effect that we could do with this image is we could add some oil paint. I do think that I'm going to crop the image. So while I'm in Photoshop, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I want to bring the center here to the rule of thirds and click on that. And I see one more spot that I want to clean up right here, make this small. And let's go to the right heel brush. There we go. And there's one right here. I think that's going to do it. And then I have an option. I could brighten, I could kind of play with the colors here if I wanted. So now that I have this image pretty much set, you could decide if you wanted to clean up this part of the petal. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and let's just clean up that little edge right there. And I think I'll grab the clone tool to do that. Click the Option key. Let's make this larger. Click that Option key. I'm just going to clean up this edge of the petal. And tweak this just a little bit. And once, let me go down here, kind of clean up that spot. Just kind of reshape that petal just a little bit. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to click File, Save, take this back into Lightroom, and we can make our final adjustments together. So remember, I've added this bokeh overlay to the description, and feel free to download and use. And next time you're out shooting in the garden, I really hope that you will look for an opportunity to shoot intentionally with some beautiful bokeh behind your image, but also to capture that as a standalone image that you can use in other shots. So Photoshop is going to bring this image into Lightroom. Let's see, it's almost done saving. Once it's in here, I am going to make some final adjustments. My vision is to work on the color just a little bit and probably to open up the temperature and the warmth in this background. So here we go. Let's go back to Lightroom now, and we'll have this image that we have just combined right here in our files. And it's coming over now. And let me go ahead and make this panel smaller. We're going to enlarge this image. It's loading. Having a slow computer day. I think I need to reboot Lightroom. I don't know if you run into that from time to time. Okay, so now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a mask and do the background first. So that's going to do everything except my flower. And what I want to do is let's go ahead and remove showing the overlay. I want to first give it a little bit of warmth. I want to pop the exposure just a little bit. And I want to add a little bit of a pink tone to the background light. We could also pop the whites and maybe leave the exposure where it was. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. I still feel like it's a little too, there's just a little bit of yellow. Okay. And the greens, I want to keep it a little bit more on the green side. So I'm going to bring that back. And I think that looks nice. You could also open up the shadows if you wanted. There are some shadows down here in the bottom on our background. So some options there. Okay, the next mask is I'm going to select subject. And here's an opportunity for us to play with our flower a little bit. And again, I want to just open up the shadows just a little bit in these dark areas. Add a little pop to the whites. And we can also play with the saturation of the color. So I could saturate it more. I could also desaturate it. For this flower, I think right where it is probably just fine. So I'm going to leave that. Now I'm going to add one more mask. And what I like to do to my flower images, I'm going to use the brush tool. And I want to come in and just brush in the center area. We know that the light is coming from this direction. So I want to come in with this brush and I'm going to add just a little pop of exposure. Just a little bit. Open up the shadows. Let's zoom in. Open up those shadows. And I think that is going to do it. We could also add a little texture or clarity. I think just a little texture is going to do it. I don't feel like I need the clarity, which darkens it. All right, so let me show you that before. Let's go here. That's before the pop, and here's the after. So again, popping that center of the flower when it makes sense, and in this case, I think it does. The light is coming from this direction. The last thing we could do to this image is we could also go ahead and do a vignette if we wanted. So let's go back to our basic panel, come down. I also would probably do a manual noise reduction just to smooth out all that beautiful light. And then we could try a vignette. The vignette is just going to bring that detail to the center. You could also try a white vignette just to give more pop and fun and softness. So it's kind of your preference of how you want this image to shine. All right, thanks so much for watching the channel. Please like, comment, and I hope you'll subscribe. I post videos at least usually once a week, sometimes twice, and I'm always open to ideas of videos that you'd like to see. Thanks so much again for supporting my channel, and I hope you have fun editing and using these bokeh overlays.